Well, guys, the first thing to go on you are your eyeballs. Around age 40, 45, most of us need cheaters. Women, it's strength, usually around 45 to 50. But we know so much about eyeballs, and we use so little of that knowledge in design. We know that one of the first things that happens as you age, especially with men, is glare and contrast becomes a problem. So can you tell me why on packaging we put low contrast lettering on a glossy background in a well-lit retail environment that you can't read? You know, this is not brain surgery, it's just called paying attention. You know, there are solutions that will allow us to deal with things related to vision that will improve the consumer experience, and they don't have to be ugly. A lot of people think that if you try to import this knowledge, that directly dumbs down your design or takes the beauty out of it, and it is the opposite. It makes it a seamless transition between the person and the product. Most of us in here have some degree of hearing deficit. For boomers, usually what happens is that the high frequencies and the low frequencies, you know, when you're a young kid, you have a very large bandwidth that you can hear, but as you age, it clips the high and the low frequencies, so your bandwidth comes in. So that's one thing that sucks with getting old. Another thing is the auditory discrimination, is being able to differentiate between different frequencies in a noisy environment. You may, for those of you who have a hearing aid or have parents who wear hearing aids, it is one of the chronic problems for them that they can't hear conversations in a room that has several conversations going. It just turns into white noise. But there's another aspect about the consumer product experience and sound that you should pay attention to. You have products that sound cheap. You have that experience. When you open them, they just don't sound right. If you open up a food product that's vacuum packed, there's different sound qualities of that vacuum leaving the container. And some of them are as annoying as hell, and others really sound wonderful. Well, you get to control that. And you should be paying attention to the auditory signature of your products as much as you're paying attention to the visual signature and the tactile signature. Smell is obvious. You know, there's not, from an ergonomic perspective, there's not a lot that we can do on this one. We have been involved in some products where we're impregnating them with certain smells, but for all intent and purpose, this is a new frontier, yet to be defined. Taste is an interesting one. You know, as you get older, you know, the saltiness becomes more difficult to detect, and the sweetness becomes more difficult to detect. But the perception of taste can be dramatically impacted through design. You can design a package or a way that you're delivering your food or beverage product, and you can actually make that taste better through design. So let me explain. If I go out and I buy a pizza and I bring it in here, we have a pizza box, and I had 2 pizzas, but outside the room I took that pizza and I put it on a lovely piece of dinnerware. We do a taste test. I'll guarantee you, the people that eat the pizza, the same pizza, off of the nice dinnerware will claim that that pizza tastes better, because that is part of the experience. That experience will influence how you perceive and process taste. So manipulating the form and the color and the textures can have a direct impact on taste. We all have one of these. How we process information, how we become familiar with new products. Someone sets a new product in front of you and you try to figure out how to interface with it. How do you turn it on? How do you open it up? Where do you grab it? And if there's any hesitation, people think, well, it's user error. In the medical industry, the FDA has just recognized that there's no such thing as user error. Think about that. They call it use error. Their attitude is that if you are using a medical product and you use it the wrong way, it is because the design of the product led you to believe that the way you're supposed to use it was one way, when in fact it should have been the other way. It is a use error, not a user error. So when you're behind the glass watching users experience for the first time concepts, we've all heard at some point in time people say, well, this is a pretty dense group of consumers. Hopefully the next group would be a lot smarter. Well, the flip side is true, is that your product did not communicate to them. It didn't say, grab me here, pinch me here, slide this, here's how you get into me, here's how you open. Which kind of leads to this. Everyone has one of these. This is your heart. Your heart and your soul. A lot of people, kind of do one of these things and say, hey, how do you feel about this? Well, there's a lot of debate about where the actual foundation of feeling resides in your body. But it's no doubt, it's part of your brain, but it's part of your whole sensory experience that really culminates in this experience that you have, that either puts a grin on your face when you use a product, or puts an unhappy face, or it makes you mad, and you start to broadcast that and share it with everyone else. But that heartfelt experience with a product leads me to another concept that I want to lay out for you today when you think about boomers. And we alluded to it a little bit earlier, and that's this concept of dignity. Living with dignity. Remember, it's not all medical related. If I have to ask for help, I'm defeated. If I know that I have to ask for help, it just doesn't make me feel good. It makes me feel kind of shitty. And even if I'm 45 or 50, we see this even manifest itself in children who have to ask for help to open up a package. They have to ask their parent, can you get me into this? Now, they express their frustration by getting mad. Boomers express their frustration by internalizing it and saying, this getting old thing is really bad. But you can help that. And that's the difference between a brand that people can connect with. They find it easy to use, easy to open. It's a brand that they'll go back for day in and day out. Bringing this more humane approach. You say, well, humane, what's inhumane with packaging? Well, my attitude is bad design is pretty inhumane. We're not paying attention. So I think we can do a lot better. We can bring dignity to all products that we're working on. We talked a little bit about ergonomics, and most people think, well, yeah, we do that ergonomic thing at our place. Yeah, we sprinkle it in phase 1 of the program. Ergonomics is not something you sprinkle in at the conceptual phase. It really kind of frames a way of thinking. Because depending upon the product and the intended user cohort that you're trying to sell into and where it's being used, that really helps you scope out on the front end how you're going to approach the problem. What are the different senses of the person are more or less important, and how can we put together a research and design program that is going to be more responsive to fine-tuning that consumer experience on the front end, which is very broad and conceptual, down to the details of stroke width, contrast ratios, and the words that are being used on instructional materials to communicate how the product operator manual functions on the back end of a program. Everyone's got one of these in their office. You learn about the consumers, you create some ideas. But how many of you go back to the point of sweat and actually test these ideas with consumers? And I'm not talking about focus groups. Focus groups are dead. They really don't work that well. I don't know whether I've said it here at pace for them before, but what you need to keep in mind, and you've probably witnessed if you've been behind the glass, is there's 8 to 10 people in there. It's usually 1 to 2 alpha dogs that the moderator has to control. There's 1 or 2 people that you think are dead. They're kind of sitting there in a catatonic state. They're collecting their money, and the rest just kind of go with the flow. Now, they're not trying to mess with you, but that is the group think when they're out of context. Note to self, take your products back to people and ask them for their opinions, let them experience them at the point of sweat, where they actually use the products. And do it on their turf, not on your turf, because they'll be a lot more comfortable, a lot more candid, and there's a lot more richness around that context of use that you can walk away with. You'll have tremendous insights in all of the things that surround your product. It tells you so much about how people are really interfacing with things. And you need to have a team that is multifunctional. You need to bring to the table the decision makers from the first kickoff meeting and have them part of the process from start to finish. That's people from brand, marketing, supply chain, manufacturing, design, ergonomics, human behavior, market research, all of them. It's the way to move. There's a lot of tools and techniques that you can use, but ultimately what you need to keep in mind is how do we get inside the bodies and back to that think, feel, and behave? How do we really resolve this? What people say they do is one thing, and what they really do and behave and how they behave is another thing. A lot of research that supports new product development programs on the front end relies on self-reporting of consumers, whether they be surveys, whether they be focus groups,